Hello, everybody. This is Still Rose's podcast. This podcast was created for women by women to elevate women's voices. I hope everybody is doing well and weathering, if you're in cold areas, weathering the cold. I have a few relatives and friends in warmer climates, and I am incredibly jealous, although they have informed me that when it gets hot there, it's like brutal. So perhaps I like my mild New Jersey summers and winters and springs and falls. But again, hope everyone's doing good. We're mid-January, like we're in 2026, like this is happening. So I have been focusing a bit. Well, health and wellness is always like top of mind for me. I've been going through challenges and hurdles myself that I'm going to share once I have a resolution to everything, because it's just like wild. But with it top of mind, women's medical autonomy has been something that's come up in my mind quite a bit. Now, by medical autonomy, I mean the right to be able to make decisions for yourself and the right to be informed about your own care. I did a really brief scrub to get some dates because I actually wanted to share some history of this with you. Now, I talk a lot about shared decision making on these calls, and I talk about advocating for yourself at your doctor's office, making sure that you can educate yourself. We have the benefit, my friends, of being able to look things up on our own. We are able to research things on our own and then come in and be informed about what we think might be going on in our bodies. And that's like a never before seen thing. That's new. I don't know if everyone's aware of how new that is, but that's actually fairly new. I'm going to run through dates here, but like that's like kind of a new thing here. Prior to the internet really exploding, there wasn't anywhere to get information beyond like going to the library and sifting through books. But like, how are you going to realistically do that, right? You're going to open up a book, and if you don't have any medical knowledge or medical training, you're going to feel pretty like in over your head pretty quickly. You would have to be really, really committed in order to make heads or tails about whatever you're reading. Now, I'm not saying that that you're not committed if you do this and give it a shot. Give it a shot. Like, I mean, this is how you learn, right? But I could understand why older generations and generations that are no longer here had to rely on medical professionals, and they didn't have a choice. That was it. It was what the doctor said is what was going to happen. And sometimes you weren't even given all the information. So this is actually quite interesting to me. Obviously, this is way, way back, but 1800s, legal non-personhood and medical paternalism was the default, which means married women's legal identity was often treated as covered, quote unquote, by their husbands, shaping norms that the male had the authority in the family and medical life. So before you're married, your father makes all the decisions for your health, makes all the medical decisions for you, is the one that the doctor speaks to when you're in the room, at the doctor's offices, and kind of handles you. Once you're married, you're then passed over to your husband, who then is in charge of your care, which sounds insane. Even saying it out loud hurts my face. In the mid-1800s, there was a gradual erosion of coverture via Married Women's Property Acts, helping establish married women as separate legal entities, which is important for later on. In the 1800s, medicine broadly operated in paternalistic model, which we already have an idea. Physicians decided and patients complied. So basically, and this was often amplified for women by stereotypes framing them as overly emotional or less rational, which, it's interesting because, and I'm going to digress for a second, but women's emotions and women's sense of things is actually a unique gift that we have in order to gauge what's happening around us. And it has been like deteriorated to the point of you're hysterical if you have feelings. You're hysterical if you cry. You're hysterical if you have big emotions over something. That's ridiculous. Like, this is our barometer. This is how we know what's going on. Like, this is our sense. And yes, fine, don't have a crying fit don't make a spectacle of yourself. But at the same time, if you go down to the core, this is basically making us women believe that our intuition and our emotions are wrong. And we're not wrong. 19th century moves into a bit of a hysteria. So now it's a long-running, but now discredited, obviously, diagnostic tradition disproportionately applied to women, which is part of a broader pattern where women's symptoms were psychologized or minimized. It's all in your head. That's what that says. In the 19th century, which is the 1900s, I was born in the 1900s, everybody, where I think most of you were too. It's all in your head is a big deal. That's the rhetoric. You're crazy. It's in your head. You have PMS, your emotions are all over. It's in your head. No. It's in my hormones. It's interesting too, because this way of thinking is actually still heavily present today. How many times has your husband told you it's in your head, or a male relative told you it's in your head? I had my poor son-in-law, I said something about perimenopause, and he kind of just slipped, I guess, in front of me. He was like, oh, now it's in your head. And I was like, don't make me pull medical research out on you. Just don't, because I will. And he started laughing. I'm like, don't mess with me with that, because you guys, my whole family kind of teases me a little bit about how worked up I get about everything, but it's just so important to me. Anyway, 1900s to 1940s, this is where modern medicine expands and women's consent often doesn't. So 1902 to 1906, there was a thing called Twilight Sleep in childbirth, where there was a drug regimen promoted as pain relief, but also produced amnesia during childbirth. That's actually kind of crazy, because then you have nothing. You have no idea what's happening to your body. 1914, there was a case that happened in the United States, recognizing that performing a procedure without consent can be legally wrong. Yes, this was happening because they would dope you up and then just make the best decision for you, but then tell you about it later. Maybe. Next part is actually really, really important. And I thought this was kind of crazy. Let me see, is it here? In the 1960s, non-disclosure to patients, including women, was common, meaning they didn't tell them what was going on. A historical review notes that not telling patients they had cancer was often the norm. A 1961 study found most physicians would not usually inform patients of a cancer diagnosis. This is a clear example of the clinicians assuming patients couldn't handle or wouldn't understand serious information. Oh my God. So basically, you could have terminal illness. Death is knocking on your door, but no one's going to tell you about it because your little brain can't handle it. 1965 to 1979 was the most interesting to me, because this is a little bit closer to where I was born, which is 1985. But again, I'd like to point out here, I'm only 42. Like, I was alive, not during everything I just said, but in the next things that I talk about, I was alive. I was born during some of this, which means my parents are still with me. My aunts and uncles and everybody of that generation are still alive. Everyone who was part of these practices is still alive today. 1965, somebody that was a teenager in 1965 or very young in 1965, they're still alive today, which means they're permeating some of these thoughts and some of this culture, because this was the norm, which is crazy. Let's see here. So 1965 to 1979, reproductive privacy rights and the women's health movement pushed autonomy forward. 65, constitutional protection for married couples, contraception use was a major step forward in reproductive decision-making. This made contraceptives available for married couples. 60s to 1970s was the second wave of the women's health movement. Women organized specifically because they felt discouraged from asking questions and pressured to depend on the experts, building the cultural expectation that women should be informed participants in their own care. Yes, we want that. I did a quick search on the side because I wanted some key milestones in when did it become legal for women to obtain their own birth control. This is crazy. 1960 was the first oral contraceptive pill was approved by the FDA. 1965, the Supreme Court struck down a Connecticut law banning contraception for married couples, ruling it violating marital privacy. Mid-1960s is when it became okay to use contraception when you were married, but only when you were married. It was illegal to obtain it as a single woman. You were not allowed to have it. I don't know how I feel about this. I mean, I know how I feel about it. And I go back and forth in my head about this because I'm like, they didn't trust us to be able to deal with it. But then part of it was also probably more so that our bodies were not our own. And our bodies were basically the selling point to prospective males to come marry us. So if your body has been touched by other males, no one's going to want to marry you. And thus, I think, is where the snowball happened here. 1972, the court expanded the right to contraception to unmarried individuals, ensuring equal access for all. And in 1977, the right was further affirmed for minors, invalidating state prohibitions and their access to birth control. 77. My husband was born in 75. He grew up in this day and age where women were treated as not idiots, but yeah, basically like treated as non-equals, which often brings interesting conversations to our household because I was not born in this time. Let me see here. So it goes a little bit further and it continues to go. And you start to see in the early 2000s, Let's see, 1973 to 1992, abortion rights recognized, then husband control provisions rejected. 1976, Planned Parenthood strikes down spousal consent requirements for abortion. So at this point, you could individually go and have an abortion if you wanted to. You did not have to have your husband's consent. 92, again, reinforcing that married women aren't subordinate decision makers in reproductive care, rejects spousal notification requirements, meaning ta-da, women can go by themselves to the doctor and make decisions for their bodies on their own. They do not have to have their partner, their husband there saying, yes, you can do this. 2000s to 2010. So I want to just back up. 1973 and 1992. I was born in 1985 again, or 1983. So I look at this and I'm like, holy cow, like this was happening when I was growing up. Let's see, 2000 to 2010s, medication, abortion access, and patient-centered consent standards are expanded. Actually, was aware of a lot of this because I worked at doctors' offices. And then unfortunately, 2022 to 2024, a major legal rollback on abortion rights, but medication access battles continue. And then it goes further. It's interesting though, because I've read articles where, and I've seen quotes and I've seen things where it talks about how, like, you know, even if women were at a doctor's appointment, the doctor wouldn't even speak to the woman. The woman would be sitting to the side and the doctor would speak to the husband about the woman and say to the husband, well, what's wrong? What's going on with her? And it's insane to me because it's so important for us to be able to understand what's going on with our bodies. And it's important for us to be able to speak about what is happening and to feel empowered to speak about what's going on in our own bodies. Like I noted, I'm going through something right now that is not pleasant and uncomfortable and highly frustrating. I could only imagine if I was growing up if I was living my life in a different day and age where I couldn't make an appointment for the doctor myself and come and say like, hey, I have this problem. Some stuff is really sensitive. And I'll admit, some stuff is embarrassing. You don't want to have to like go to your husband, please, can you make an appointment for me? I can only imagine what these women went through and probably staying silent a lot of the time because they didn't want to speak up. And thus was the beginning of what you see today. Because while we have more rights today, there's still this undertone of, you know, women are too emotional. My husband just said it to me the other day and I almost frying panned him. Like, you know, like it's the craziest thing to see like how far we've come and then to see where we're at. And I'm like, my God, we've come so far, but it feels like we still have so much more to go. And we do have more to go, but I have hopes and I hope you all do too. I want to mention one other person, and I think I might have lost the tab. Oh, there it is. Well, I don't have the whole tab. I wanted to recognize Mary Edwards Walker. She was the only woman to ever earn the Medal of Honor. I started looking for historical women to talk about on the podcast because there's so many women that have done so many amazing things and we don't hear anything about them. Ta-da! Why? You know why. So I'm going to start just kind of plugging and mentioning these women that I'm reading up on. There was the very first female doctor, and I lost the tab, and I'm actually kind of annoyed about it because she did such amazing things. Oh, here it is. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell. So she actually applied to medical school. Let's see. She was rejected by 29 medical schools, and then she was admitted to the Geneva Medical College in 1847. Reason why she was admitted, and there's a little bit of like debate around it, was that the the folks, the administration that was looking at the application, they wanted to reject her, but then they kind of went back and forth on it. So they turned it around and decided, we're not going to reject her outright. We're going to put it to the student body and let the student body vote. And the student body is all male, so they're assuming, all right, the student body is going to take care of this. We don't have to dirty our hands, right? Well, they put it to the student body to vote. Well, the student body apparently either thought it was a joke, didn't take it seriously, and they thought they were just messing with the administrators, so they all voted yes and let her in. And then she got an education. 2 years later, graduated at the top of her class. Like, it's an amazing, amazing thing to hear. So wanted to highlight her in this moment where I was talking about medical autonomy for women. I hope you found this episode interesting. I think it's interesting to know the history. I think we all really need to pay attention here to the history because it actually does help inform what we have going on today. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I appreciate you very much, and I will catch you on the next one. Take care.